So to cover what we're going to go through tonight, we're going to share a little bit about us, the Department of Montgomery Planning, and some background of the Clarksburg Gateway Sector Plan, some of our community engagement efforts to date, and what we've heard so far. Then we're going to have the bulk of our presentation is really sharing with you our goals and emerging ideas that we've developed after hearing from community feedback and thinking about the plan in our own areas of expertise. And we'll be asking you to give us feedback on that through a few short polls through the meeting. But then really we want to set aside the second half of the meeting to take your questions and read any comments that you have in the chat. Well, you'll have an opportunity to raise your hand and speak your questions if you'd like to as well. And then I think once we see that we're about wrapping up to the end of the 8:30 time frame, we'll circle back and share some next steps and where we expect the plan to go from here. So Montgomery Planning has a number of functions, one of which is to develop plans to guide the future. So that's what we're looking at right now for this area in Clarksburg, is to think about the long-term future for the area, how to set it up for success, and generate a framework that really supersedes and replaces the policies that are in place today from the 1994 plan, and think about the next 20 years or so. But other folks in our department are also involved with reviewing applications for development, and those are often, or they're always looked at in terms of conformance with whatever master plan is applicable to that area. So really these sector plans and master plans help to set up the framework and guidelines for future development. And another function of our department is to analyze and study county information and issues. So I wanted to take this time to introduce our team before we move forward. So I think we have a list of folks that I'll be introducing, but I'll start again. My name is Clark Larson. I'm with the Up-County Division of Montgomery Planning, and I'm the lead planner on the Clarksburg Gateway Sector Plan.
Evening, I'm Don Ziegler, the Up-County Master Plan Supervisor.
Jalon, I don't know if you're looking for your mute button, but feel free to introduce yourself if you like.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jalon Robinson. I'm a Planning 2 intern.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James Lee. I'm with Montgomery Planning's Research and Strategic Projects Division, and I work on demographics.
Good evening. I'm Jason Sartori. I'm the Planning Director for the county.
Good evening. I'm John Lieberts. I'm the Historic Preservation Planner.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lily Vernon, and I'm a long-range planner with Montgomery Parks.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Lisa Gavoni, and I'm working on the housing recommendations in the plan.
Good evening. I'm Nick Peavy. I'm the transportation planner with Montgomery County for this plan.
Good evening. I'm Roberto Duke, and I'm with the community design with the Up-County Division.
All right, thank you all. And you'll hear from us in this presentation coming forward, but I just want to take the time to introduce us all at once. So the context of Clarksburg today is that there's an existing master plan approved from 1994 that it encompasses a larger area than what we're looking at today. It includes the Clarksburg Town Center, Village Center, Cabin Branch, and outlying areas from that. There have been minor amendments to this plan in 2011 and 2014 that looked at particular elements of, first, the retail staging component of how retail development could happen in relation to residential development. And then in 2014, there was an amendment that really focused on the 10 Mile Creek watershed and planning area. Typically, we look at and revisit plans every 20 to 25 years. We are aware that some plans have gone a little farther than that, but we're trying to address them as today's issues come up and as we're able to look at these master plan policies to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for the success into the future. Until this sector plan is approved and adopted, the 94 plan remains in effect. So any projects that come forward, any public expenditures or improvements that come forward are still going to look at the 94 plan until such time as we have a replacement for this smaller area. Also work within a context of our general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050, that was recently adopted. So that sets sort of the overall umbrella and framework for how our county in general, and particularly many elements of how our planning department thinks about the future and how we work in communities. But we're also driven by our Vision Zero policy, applying the lessons from the racial equity and social justice law and looking at our communities through that lens. Being aware and addressing the need for mitigating climate change and addressing climate resiliency, adopting complete streets design guidelines that influence how our streets are built and modified in the future, as well as our parks, recreation, and open space plan. So that this is just a selection of the many aspects of our planning framework that we think about in the context of how the sector plan will be prepared. The purpose of this sector plan area, you can see the boundary here on the right side of the screen in the dashed black line, was really initially intended to re-examine a portion of the 1994 Clarksburg Master Plan to explore the potential for new housing, new commercial development, and how we can stitch together the community with new transportation networks, as well as protecting the environment as future development occurs. You're probably aware that we're within the watershed for Little Seneca Creek that leads into the backup drinking water reservoir for Little Seneca Lake. So we're looking at the both approaches of considering new development in the future while also protecting the environment. So we are between essentially the phases of our visioning and listening components of the plan. We're leading into the development of preliminary recommendations that we'll be briefing the planning board on in the coming weeks. Really, we've had quite a bit of community engagement so far over the last year and a half or so. And you have the opportunity as a community to continue to engage in this process. You can see with the yellow stars, there are additional opportunities for community engagement and learning about how we are bringing forward the recommendations and how the plan will be developed. So this isn't the last chance. We want to hear from you now, but there will be opportunities going forward. So a little bit about what we've heard so far, sort of a summary of the input to date. We've heard there's an interest in more places to live, work, shop, gather, recreate in the community, some of which we think can be accomplished in the sector plan area. An awareness that many residents don't want the community to be overburdened from future growth impacts. So we're thinking about adequate facilities and amenities and not overburdening schools and other facilities as development occurs in the future. Improving access to neighborhoods and assets, schools as well. Protecting and improving water quality and natural resources. Establishing safer streets and intersections where people cross on any mode of travel. Improving public transit routes and shelters, and adding wayfinding and interpretive markers to help people get around, but also learn about the history of Clarksburg. Our overall vision for the plan, this is sort of our guiding principle and vision statement that is a work in progress, but I think it's starting to be solidified now. We want to establish this harmonious balance between sustainable development, future development of housing, commercial, employment, recreation, with the preservation of natural resources. We want to have resilient neighborhoods that are connected and provide places for people to gather and meet each other and enjoy themselves, and respect the community's environmental and community values at the same time. So I'm going to start with land use and development. That's sort of my charge here with the sector plan, and then I'll hand it off to others to speak to their sections. But we have two main goals really with the land use and development chapter, which will how it will be developed in the working draft. We want to not only support compact mixed-use development along the planned transit corridor that integrates housing, retail, neighborhood services, and amenities within the Clarksburg community, but also we want to maintain the residential character along 355. I just thought of something. I want to back up here and start a poll. I got a little bit ahead of myself. We want to ask you questions to learn a little bit about you. So I'm going to open the poll here. And if you don't mind, we'd love to Let me just read the messages here. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you on how your relationship is to the community and what is most important to you. This might take some time. I know there's some to read through, but it gives me a chance to take a breath, but we also want to hear from you.
I'll start if that's okay. Everyone's okay with that?
Well, initially we were hoping to have the poll done on the
Oh, no
screen,
worries.
but if you want to share with us, please feel free. I would love to hear from you.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. The only reason I asked is because I'm at Clarksburg right now at a game and I was able to step out. So I
Oh,
can
okay.
briefly just in detail explain who I am and what I represent. My name is Candace Carroll. My husband and I run a nonprofit organization in Clarksburg for youth within the area. We service on average about 175 kids per season, and we are a year-round program. We offer sports such as basketball and cheerleading, and my husband is also is a mentor and teacher within the county. And we have 3 children within the county as well who attend Clarksburg, Rocky Hill, and Cabot Branch Elementary School. And we are Cabot Branch residents. We are very engaged actively through our kids, our community, in giving back our time, resources, and our ultimate goal is to service the children within Clarksburg, give them a hub, a place to connect, to also give back to the local community through volunteer, as well as through just youth services. And our ultimate goal, my husband and I, is to bring a development property into the Clarksburg area, which would allow like a recreation space. So that is why I am on this call. I'm very interested in seeing what the next few years will bring to the Clarksburg community and how we can also contribute.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I don't think we have time to get through all 53 or so of you. I'm glad you spoke up, Candy, and shared that with us. But I think it also allowed us to keep the poll open a little longer. So thank you for sharing that. And I look forward to hearing from others after our presentation. We want to share some information from you, and then we want to open it up to the floor after that. So I think we might be able to, I see about 29 of us or 32 of us have taken the poll. It seems to be slowing down. I think I might end the poll now. And I can share the results with you. We'll also publish this online. I don't see that it's being shared, but I hope you can see that about 2/3 of participants live or work in the Clarksburg area. There's a few business owners or employers. A few more, about 22% of those responded own or managed properties. I imagine a lot of that's owning property. And then some of you that are interested in Clarksburg, and we didn't cover that in an earlier topic. If I look at the topics of interest, I know this was a lot to look through, but I wanted to kind of capture the main topics that we're going to be talking about here tonight and we'll be addressing the sector plan. Looks like there's a lot of interest in adequate public facilities, good building design, access to neighborhoods, schools, parks, destinations, safe streets. This doesn't mean that anything else is not important, but those seem to be the standouts. So thank you for taking that poll, and I'm sorry that I had to back up there. All right, so I'm going to continue with the land use goals. So these 2 main buckets of our goals. One way that we see this coming together to influence future development, influence future community change is through this concept framework plan. This is a work in progress. It may look somewhat different as it makes its way into the plan eventually, but really this is showing that we're looking at the corridors of Frederick Road being a more primarily residential corridor, possibly allowing some infill development and maybe small scale commercial, but really the observation road connection that we'd like to see completed in the future being more concentrated along Gateway Center Drive, the former ComStat Laboratories property, the property owned by the Linthicum family to the south, as really the focal point for a new activity center, a new, not downtown necessarily, but new focal area for infill development and more compact development around this corridor, partially because as one of our colleagues, Nick Peavy, is going to share, we are looking for public transit along this section. So this sort of sets up some of the framework for how we think the plan can develop in the future. And then some of the more regulatory aspects of how what comes into play when future development happens and the potential for properties. On the left are the zoning districts that are in place today, and that influences the types of uses that can occupy properties, as well as the development standards that come into play when someone brings a development application or when you want to change something on your property. We're looking to transition those zoning districts into more flexible, sort of mixed-use focused districts along the Observation Drive corridor. So the CR stands for commercial residential. We're thinking about slightly increasing the maximum density, what we call Florida area ratio. That's that 1.0. Slightly increasing the limit on some of those properties. Where there's already existing neighborhoods at, let's say, Clarksburg, Gateway Commons, Clarksburg Square, Dowden Station, and others, those are really zones that apply their existing density. So we are going to transition away from the older zones that allowed the planned development to occur, or in the R200, where there was a transferable development TDR, transferable development rights in place. We're really just wanting to change the zone to reflect that existing character. So we're wanting to maintain that. So another emerging idea for the land use section is to establish a set of priorities to come into play whenever someone wants to develop a property using the optional method of development that allows them to get more density, more compact development, different kinds of development standards, but in turn they have to provide public benefits to the community and to their property. So we want to set these priorities in the sector plan to help guide that future development, to incorporate sustainable features, achieve more than the 15% minimum affordable housing units of price to moderately priced dwelling units, to include residential units of 3 bedrooms or larger in their projects. And if the concept building is proposed for demolition, to provide mitigation that would support other historic preservation efforts, and potentially partnering with a public agency or organization to establish a major public facility on that concept property as well. So actually, let's see how this works. I'm going to open the poll for the land use side. So we'd love to know your impression of that sort of highlight. I know it's a very quick overview, but sort of the main framework, the highlights of our emerging ideas, and how you feel about them today. And we'll try to do this for every section going forward, just to kind of get a sense of what you're hearing or if you want to hear more. I'll give it another 30 seconds. There's no wrong answers. We just want to kind of take a temperature of the room. Maybe 10 more seconds. Looks like it's slowed down. Okay, so looks like predominantly want to learn more, and many think it's okay but need some refinement. I know maybe it's not that much detail to go on, but thank you for sharing your impressions on that. So I'm going to hand it over to Roberto.
Sure. Thank you, Clark. Just want to briefly discuss community design and placemaking. And I kind of think that this is where, everything comes together. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that buildings help define the public realm. And what I'm calling the public realm is really like the streetscapes, really from building face to building face. How is that designed? And one of the things we think that is important is that these buildings should frame the streets and the public spaces that are designed in the future, and that the facades of the building also need to respond and activate the public realm. So at the ground floor, so that includes commercial buildings. So to have more glazing, so you can see inside of, see the buildings, see what's going on, the activity inside of the buildings on the first floor level. And, with residential buildings, looking at providing things like porches, stoops, covered stoops and bay windows and that sort of thing to make create more visual interest at the ground floor level. And one of the things that we want to do is to locate at a higher density and a mix of uses near the transit and community centers, community areas that we're looking at, and then transition down in scale as you go to the adjacent neighborhoods. And also creating potential for placemaking strategies to help kind of define the character of the Clarksburg area. And I'll just, on the next series of slides, show a few different ideas, emerging ideas of those types of things. So this slide is really showing primarily the commercial areas, and the photograph on the left is an older established street in the Philadelphia area, Germantown Avenue. But you can see the two photos on the right are of a newer development in Prince George's County called Riverdale Park Town Center. And both show many of the same things for a commercial area that we want to see. That the streets are well defined, so with the parking behind and to the rear of buildings, that there's visual interest. They have these great storefront windows. You have awnings. You have signage, and it really creates an inviting space. On the lower one, you have an covered arcade, the lower right image, leading to a food hall. And then, of course, again, placing buildings closer to the street so that it promotes an active streetscape with pedestrians walking in that public realm, that streetscape. Next slide, please. In terms of for residential, we want to help define the space between, I guess, the back of sidewalk. So that's the public space. And then you have the semi-private space, which would be between the back of sidewalk and your house itself. And the house, your internal space, is your private realm. And we want to create a realm that is inviting and active along the street. So one of the ways that we could define the semi-public realm would be to have things like fencing, hedgerows, that sort of thing, the porches and the stoops that are shown in the two upper photographs. And for larger buildings, maybe an entry court or a courtyard helps to define the building spaces. And that residences should incorporate architectural features that help to blend and contribute to the public realm and the semi-public realm. Next slide. And this is just really showing just a block diagram of different housing types. And this can be applied also to commercial types. Again, one of the primary things that you see here are that the cars and the services are to the rear sides and rear of buildings. The number of curb cuts are limited so that you can help to have a nice streetscape with sidewalks, with shaded sidewalks that can promote walking and biking in the area, that can slow traffic down, and that, houses and different building types have inviting streetscapes with front porches. And one of the things that this also does by having the cars to the rear is that it allows for additional residential parking and visitor parking along the streets. So that, when you do have activities and everything at your house, that you have enough parking for those visitors. Next slide. Another thing that we want to promote is that open spaces are distributed throughout different communities, new communities and neighborhoods. and that they vary in size. And I've just really the image for if you started the upper left corner, that's showing a small pocket park that's really on the edge of a block in the King Farm community. And then maybe a little bit larger one is a small residential green at Park Potomac. And I believe in the screen they had a small clubhouse and they have a swing set for smaller kids and that sort of thing. And then the bottom left image is showing an active or an area, a little bit larger green space area that also has artwork and a seating area. So, I can imagine, and this is at Falls Grove. I can imagine that this is used for activities where, friends and neighbors can gather and meet and that sort of thing. And then larger green spaces that promote, more active sports courts and that sort of thing. And these can be distributed throughout, and none of these are really hidden to the rears of units or commercial space, that they're part of the active area of the community. Next slide. And then in terms of buildings, and this is just showing residential, but this is applicable also to commercial spaces. But we want to make sure that buildings facades are composed in a cohesive manner, that especially with townhouse units, that you're looking at this as a string rather than just individual units themselves, so that you avoid random architectural features. We do want architectural features, but we want it in some consistent manner, that there's a rhythm to the facades, that they have consistent window spacing, and the manner in which the architectural embellishments, such as the porches, the covered stoops, the bay windows, are used, and even the colors of the facades and the materials that are being used, and that they're used in an appropriate manner. Next slide. I think that might be the end of mine for just emerging ideas.
Right. Thanks, Roberto. And I will also launch a poll about this. We'd love to hear see what you think about the ideas that Roberto shared. And also, please keep those questions coming in the chat. We have someone that are capturing those questions in the chat. We're going to ask you to raise your hand and ask us questions later. So we hope to engage with you after this. Give it another few seconds. Right. All right, so it looks like a little bit more interest and support for maybe this more detailed set of slides that Roberto shared, but thanks for sharing your impressions of that.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa. I'm going to very quickly talk about some of the draft big emerging ideas that we're thinking about for housing. So the goals for our housing section really focus on the premise that the county is in a housing crisis, and that we need to do what we can do to help build and preserve more housing. The county has housing goals, and we're trying to meet those housing goals, and Clarksburg plays an important part in helping meet those goals. So the first goal is to really expand opportunities to increase density, especially along major corridors where housing can support the idea of a complete community. And we want to support more creative housing options. And, Clarksburg is wonderful. It has a diversity of housing types, but there are also, housing that we don't really see built anymore, things like duplexes, small apartment buildings, accessory dwelling units that we'd like to see built in Clarksburg too. And then, finally, we want to increase the number of income restricted affordable housing units in the Clarksburg area, especially for low and moderate income households. Next slide. So our housing recommendations, our big emerging ideas really fall into three buckets. The first one is affordable housing. New development should provide at least 15% moderately priced dwelling units. The county has something called an inclusionary zoning program. An inclusionary zoning is a mandatory set aside of at least 12.5% of housing in each development to be set aside for moderate income households. So 12.5% is the county requirement, but we're going to bump that up to 15%. And then as part of that, we also want to encourage more affordable housing above that 15%. So while not a requirement, we want to prioritize additional affordable housing as a public benefit in the Clarksburg area. Next slide. And then, the next bucket is that housing production bucket. We want to add more types of housing, more units to the housing inventory, including more types of housing, something that aligns with the goal that we talked about previously. We also want to prioritize family-size units in the Clarksburg area. That's something that the county really needs, is to build more types of housing, but also more types of housing for families that want to live here. And then finally, new housing developments in the planned area should strive to increase the quality and quantity of housing units that are accessible to people with disabilities and older adults. Next slide. And then the last bucket is that fair housing. We want to look at reducing the barriers to access housing in the county, but especially in Clarksburg. So we want to foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to housing and opportunity based on protected characteristics that are listed as the screen. And I see the question about the housing goals. The housing goals for Clarksburg, they're countywide goals. Clarksburg just plays a part of those countywide housing goals.
All right, thanks, Lisa. I think that is your section. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the impressions poll for housing. Please tell us what you think just from this information. I think to tease out the why, we would love to hear from you after our presentation to get some Q&A, or you could put it in the comments. Looks like we have about 48 people participating consistently. No, I'm sorry, 26 of 48. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So maybe a little bit more evenly split. Some that don't support or think they're way off. So I guess in our discussion, we'd love to hear why and what you think about that. All right, Nick.
All right. Oh, are we getting an echo?
I don't hear an echo.
Okay, so I'm going to talk. I'm getting I think it's gone. Sorry about that. That was a strange Zoom echo. So, in the street network and design section, the street elements, the design, the layout, it really communicates a lot and supports the housing and land use goals that we're trying to achieve with this plan. So we want to really create streets that are comfortable and inviting for people and that are also places where people want to go and not just the way they get there. And this is really has like a lot of knock-on effects. It's really good for business. It's really great for creating social interactions, and just like good streets are the foundations of a good community. And so with some of this, we want the streets, we want intersections to be designed with everyone in mind, not just people who drive. There are lots of different mode choices, and we really just want to open up the opportunities for people to choose the way that they want to get around best. And some of this language that we're using, it helps us get there with our new intersections and roads and making improvements to our existing intersections that we are going to be looking at in the plan area. Next slide, please. So, this is the master plan of highways. The first step that we're going to look at in kind of reorienting and replanning some of these streets. is to look at the layout of roads that were put out in the 1994 plan that have not been constructed. So there are portions of Observation Drive that we definitely want to take another look at. We certainly want to see that road shift away from the Coolbrook Run Stream Valley. And, we still want Observation Drive to be this important north-south connection and kind of the backbone of the activity center of this new area for development. Um, and, you know, what we want to see with it uh, is essentially, having some of these portions shifted, but we definitely are not trying to take away Observation Drive. And then just looking up in that northern section, there are some of these segments that were part of a concept for a bypass that we're also looking at whether or not those make sense with the realignment of Observation Drive. Um, in addition to that, we're really wanting to be sensitive to the environmental impacts of these roads. So we want to make sure that, the three bridges that are in the plan area are taking that into consideration with their design, with their layout as best we can to provide, these high functioning ecosystems a chance to stay around. Um, and then the next point is the reimagining of the interchange. Right now, our recommendation is to remove the planned interchange and replace it with an overpass of Little Seneca. We still think that's a really important east to west connection, and there certainly need to be more opportunities to bring people across 270 so that they can interact with other parts of their community more easily. Um, we think the interchange, we understand that it's really important, and we're doing some testing, we're doing modeling, we're really looking at it. But there are some very big costs that come with it, big environmental costs and impacts, monetary costs, and then the impacts on the placemaking opportunities and just the nature of the community that you'll see on both sides. So that's kind of where our head's at. I'm happy to talk about it later. But I'll get through these slides and we can come back to the interchange discussion. And the last thing that we want to do is to establish an internal Main Street that will kind of help center like the grid of streets within the new development area and provide some opportunities for placemaking and community building. Next slide. So this is a look at the new orientation of some of these master plan roads I've been talking about. So this is kind of what we are imagining a potential alignment of these roads could look like. Um, and so, you see observation shifted kind of away from the stream valley in certain areas instead of running right through it. And, still Little Seneca coming over and forming that important connection, new intersection with West Old Baltimore, and then observation kind of becoming Gateway Center Drive at Shawnee. And then, we still preserve an amount of a bypass. There's a road connection off of Clarksburg Road that's part of a future development that will allow you to exit off of 355 north of the historic district and get around via Observation Drive. So next slide, please. So our goal with the public transportation part of the overall transit section is to support the bus rapid transit in this transit corridor that we've been talking about. So really quickly, bus rapid transit is like a bus service, but it's also better than a typical bus. It's faster. It has features that help speed up the trip compared to typical bus services and sometimes even driving like the ability to signal jump at intersections and to run in dedicated lanes. The stations are sheltered and they're premium features like wayfinding and other amenities. And this high quality transit is like a big part of what we think will help alleviate some of the stress on the transportation on the road network that this new development will create. So we are hoping to see, continue to work with our great partners at MCDOT to make this work. And there are currently two routes that are serving the Clarksburg area. There's the 355 route, which is the longer stretch of the BRT. It now runs along Snowden Farm Parkway and then down Stringtown Road and then terminates at the outlets. And then the corridor connector route, which is the route that runs directly through along Observation Drive to points south of Milestone in the Germantown Transit Center. Next slide. So yeah, in addition to looking at the BRT, we also want to take a look at the existing bus services and understand how they can not only be better to serve the needs of the community and some and try to capture some of the feedback we've been receiving, but also how those new buses could work with the BRT and complement the BRT, which is going to be a big carrier of people throughout the area. And then we're also looking into ways we can make the BRT experience better, last mile connections, trying to find opportunities for bike and vehicle parking at the stations. So yeah, we look forward to hearing your feedback on this and how we can make this a usable transportation amenity for you. All right, next slide, please. All right, and then finally, active transportation refers to biking, walking, rolling any way that you move around. And our main goals here are building out a dense and convenient network of ways to get around locally without a car, and to identify and improve any intersections that are unsafe or create breaks in the network due to things like wide crossings of a road, inadequate crossing time, or other barriers to safety like missing sidewalk sections. And next slide, please. And you can see here is a draft of the network that we're proposing. Most of these paths are the shared use path variety, and this is what you should be familiar seeing in Clarksburg. It's separated from the road by a 6 to 8 foot buffer, and the path is 10 to 12 feet wide. These are really great. They create low stress and safe experiences for all types of users, walking, biking. And the goal here is just to really open up the community, create these like convenient connections, and allow people to get around for exercise or for fun, or for even maybe part of their commute or a local errand. And then last, we really want to tie it all together with a wayfinding network and a wayfinding program that helps people that live here and visitors understand where all the great amenities are and how they can get to them. And I look forward to hearing all your feedback later. And I want to pass it back to Clark for environmental recommendations.
All right, thanks, Nick. Before I do that, and I don't forget, I would like to launch our transportation impressions poll. Let us know what you think about that. I know there's an active discussion going on in the chat. Please just give us an indication of what you think about, and at some point, we'd love to hear why. Expecting it's like 27 folks. A couple more trickling in. All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share with you somewhat of a balance. Maybe some things you don't support or we need to go back to the drawing board on. So we'd love to hear from you during the discussion after this, why you think that. All right, I will take over environment, standing in on this. I'm not the topic expert, but I'll do my best. So with all of that in mind about thinking about future development, transportation improvements, as I said before, we also want to make sure we're protecting the watershed as much as we can. This area of the sector plan is located within a special protection area, which has a goal to minimize impervious surface to the greatest extent possible. So we are mindful of that, and we want to try to achieve that through our recommendations that we bring into the plan. At the same time, we want to conserve and expand the forests and tree canopy that exists on public and private lands, that which exists today, and also planting new trees as development occurs. In a sequence of hopefully avoiding first, minimizing, and then mitigating the impacts of development, that might be just focus more on the development impacts than the natural resources. That we'll have a set of recommendations under the goal to avoid impacts to development on natural resources. We want to implement sustainable design elements into new development and also help promote awareness and education of environmental values and the importance of the special protection area. So one way that we're thinking of doing that is to locate and design the new roadways, as Nick was saying, to avoid these sensitive environmental features. We still think it's important to connect these travelways, but we want to do it in the least damaging and disruptive way possible. Conserving land along Little Seneca Creek, keeping it out of development, either through conservation easement or by possibly expanding or establishing new public parkland along the stream valleys. Minimizing runoff from innovative site design, best management practices, establishing buffers from the streams in certain ways, and also implementing stormwater retrofits to retrofit the stormwater facilities that help to slow and clean water and restore streams in this area. To get into the forest and trees again, we want to preserve the existing trees that are there to the greatest extent possible, especially along streets and in areas of public and private properties that are seeing new development. We want to provide tree canopy and gathering places and parking lots so people have a shaded place in the summer and to make the area cooler in general. And of course, advocate for the planting of native and locally adapted tree species and vegetation whenever possible. As far as sustainable development, we'll be encouraging best management practices in future development. On the right, you can see at Dowden Station, I believe it is, there's a common area park for the neighborhood that integrates stormwater management. We want to build on this success of Dowden Station and do it even better in future development. The second bullet, making sure that surfaces are lighter colored and cool, green roofs on flat buildings so that we can cool the air, cool the water as it runs over surfaces going into the streams, and making sure that we can shade new development areas as much as possible. Whenever there are a need for new water or sewer connections, we want to minimize environmental impacts. So this is prioritizing gravity sewers, sewer lines that run on public rights of way, and connecting into existing nearby pipelines. So with historic preservation, John? I'm sorry,
Yes.
no, I'm gonna cut you off there and take a little bit of time to launch this environment poll. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that. So please give us your impressions of those emerging ideas for environment. Sorry to interrupt you, John. I think I'm getting a sense of about 29 folks are participating, so I'll wait for that. Maybe a couple more seconds if you're looking for your mouse. Okay. So I'll share this. So it sounds like mostly they're okay with you all and maybe need some refinement. So we'd love to hear where you think that is. All right, John, sorry to cut you off there.
No worries, Clark. So good evening again. I'm the team's historic preservation planner. My name's John Lieberts. So as part of the plan, staff evaluated resources for designation in the county's master plan for historic preservation, among several initiatives to preserve and celebrate Clarksburg's history. So the master plan for historic preservation is our list of historic resources that are protected under the county code and requires approval for exterior alterations by the Historic Preservation Commission. Listing on the plan requires review by the Historic Preservation Commission, Planning Board, and ultimately a vote by the County Council. And designated resources allow property owners to apply for local historic preservation tax credits for eligible projects. Next slide, please. So the plan will recommend the designation of properties associated with the former African-American Rocky Hill community in the master plan for historic preservation. This includes the Community of Faith United Methodist Church and Cemetery site, noted by the red pin on the left of the slide, and the Clarksburg Heights District, which is outlined in yellow. So the congregation acquired the church property in 1886. Shortly thereafter, opened a cemetery and a small frame building, and built the current Gothic Revival style brick church in 1925, which is shown in the center. The church and cemetery serve as a tangible link to the African American community's past, providing a sense of continuity, orientation, and place as a former center of religious, social, and educational activities. At its public hearing and work session last week, the Historic Preservation Commission found that the church and cemetery satisfied 3 designation criteria and recommended that the site be listed to the master plan for historic preservation. Clarksburg Heights, again outlined in yellow, as a unique example of a small mid-20th century subdivision planned, built, and owned by African American residents of the county. F. Wilson and Sarah Wims developed the subdivision in 1963. It helped counter widespread discriminatory housing practices and provided modern middle-class housing in the popular ranch and split-level styles to residents. At its public hearing and work session again, the Historic Preservation Commission found that this district also satisfied 3 designation criteria and recommended that the site be listed to the master plan for historic preservation. Again, for individuals who are unable to attend those meetings, this is just the start of the designation process. As I said earlier, there'll be public hearings at the planning board and the county council where participation is more than welcome, and the planning department is always welcome to take feedback as well. Next slide, please, Clark. So staff also evaluated CompSat laboratories for listing in the master plan for historic preservation. This property had been evaluated by the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Board for listing in 2005 and 2006, but never by the County Council. Staff reaffirms the Historic Preservation Commission's findings in 2005 that CompSat laboratories satisfied 6 of the 9 designation criteria as outlined in the county code. However, the sector plan will not be recommending the listing of CompSat laboratories to the master plan for historic preservation due to no economically feasible path forward for the property in the near term while meeting the department's priorities for the site. The Historic Preservation Commission will be holding their public hearing and work session on the designation next Wednesday, January 22nd at 7 p.m. You're more than welcome to attend virtually or in person. Next slide, please. Lastly, the sector plan will recognize the diversity, heritage, and history of Clarksburg. There are gateway, wayfinding, and interpretation opportunities that can explore existing and proposed historic sites and districts. There are many examples, but some are the Rocky Hill community, as mentioned previously. There could be greater interpretation of the demolished, segregated African-American elementary school, and updated interpretation of the Clarksburg Historic District towards the northern end of the sector plan. Thank you. And I look forward to hearing any feedback at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, John. And I'm getting better at this. I'm going to launch our poll now. Give us your impressions, please, of our emerging ideas and thoughts for historic preservation in the sector plan. And I think you're getting a little faster too. I'm going to close the poll in a couple seconds. Looks like slowing down. All right. All right, maybe a good balance here. Some strong support, but maybe some more to learn and more to refine on our part. Thank you for that. I think we'll turn it over to Lily for our parks discussion.
Thanks, Clark. So with the parks section, there's some really great parks in and around the sector plan area. So one of the main things we want to do is provide improved access by all modes of transportation to those parks like Black Hills Regional Park and Little Bennett Regional Park. We also want to make sure that there's a range of park and open space types that really best serve the Clarksburg community. So looking at if there's things missing in existing parks that the community would like to see amenity-wise, and then any new parks that might be possible. And then with that connectivity, we really want to make sure that folks can get across I-270. So we're looking at some new connections, road connections, as Nick mentioned, and also bike and pedestrian facilities, as well as transit access. throughout the whole sector plan area, we're looking for more opportunities for active recreation in particular. And then we're looking to expand parkland and also protect the really important natural resources and natural areas within the sector plan area. Next slide. So around access to parks, we want to focus on improving wayfinding to those existing parks connections from within the sector plan area. The image here in the center of the slide shows an example of some countywide bicycle wayfinding that's in the works. We're also looking to add a potential transit stop on an existing ride-on route at Black Hill Regional Park, and as well as other opportunities for expanding transit access to parks. And then also adding a shared use path on West Old Baltimore Road in the future, and looking at here in the map, the red dash lines as new bike and pedestrian connections and new roadway connections or improved roadway connections. And then we're also exploring opportunities to improve access to Little Bennett Regional Park and Ovenhazen Wells Recreation Park by completing some already master planned pedestrian and bikeway improvements on a number of roads. Next slide. Around amenities within parks and also any opportunities for new parks. We're looking in particular at the ComSat site, which is probably the largest opportunity for redevelopment in the sector plan area. So providing a network of open spaces and also exploring opportunity for an 8 to 12 acre local park with active recreation opportunities. We're also considering how to include some public uses of the Linthicum East Elementary School site. So that's actually owned by the Parks Department, reserved for future use as an elementary school. But we want to be able to provide some temporary uses of that site for the public before that school is needed. And then we also want to investigate additional amenities at Dowden's Ordinary Special Park, which align with its historic significance as a gathering space and support low impact activation of the median of Observation Drive or Roberts Tavern Drive by an HOA or another organization. Next slide. And finally, around our conservation goals, we are hoping to establish some parkland along Cool Brook tributary, shown here in the map in the red outline. We're also looking to minimize and mitigate impacts from any road and bridge construction, including new connection for Little Seneca Parkway and Observation Drive, like Nick mentioned. And then we're also exploring opportunities to include wildlife crossings to connect the parkland that we have on both sides of I-270 and also some of these other roadways to make sure that we take advantage of this really extensive habitat and make it safer for not only animals but also people driving as well. And that I think is my section.
I believe so. All right, so I will launch this second to last poll, I believe. So you can share your impressions of our emerging ideas for parks, open space, and recreation. We have one more topic to cover, and then we'd like to open it up for your comments and questions. All right, looks like everyone has shared. So mostly they're okay, but need some refinement. So we'd like to hear from you in either the comments or questions, what that means to you, but it looks like a lot are feeling like it looks great as well. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about the public facilities aspects. We want to make sure that the sector plan is adequately serving the existing community, people that live, work, visit here, as well as thinking about people who are yet to come and come through the community in the future. So we're looking at enhancing or increasing where they don't exist, safe routes to school for students, staff, caregivers, to get to school. Maybe if they're not taking a bus, not driving, we want to make it easier and safer for people to walk and bike or roll to school. Ensuring that there's adequate school capacity. I know this has been an issue of concern for Clarksburg in the past, but as new development occurs, as populations shift within existing housing, we want to make sure, and the sector plan will ensure that there's adequate school capacity to the extent we can. We work with Montgomery County Public Schools. They really set their own boundaries and they think about their capital needs for schools and building new schools or renovating. But we provide some guidance, especially thinking about new development that's coming in the future to help work with the school system to make sure that there are enough seats and enough school amenities. We want to ensure that the sector plan allows safe, accessible, and co-located public facilities. That's really speaking to if you have a new public library, recreation center, that it might go along hand in hand with housing or commercial, or that some public facilities can be put together. So really being efficient about providing those amenities and facilities. And to the extent that also that we have the ability to influence the provision of cellular, public wireless internet, broadband services. We want to at least raise the topic of the fact that there's not enough cell coverage in the area that we've heard from what we've heard from the community, and we understand from some of our analysis. So the sector plan will be addressing that and really hoping to bring partners together to solve that. So to get back to the school capacity issue, really we're looking in the out years, even with projected new housing units, new students that are coming in with future development or might be turning over in the housing that exists today. We believe there's enough seats, especially for elementary schools, which I think has had the biggest issue in the past, but this carries as well with our middle and high school capacity. So we think that there is adequate service of space and capacity for the schools, even in the next 10, 15 years or so. As to the setting of boundaries, I know this was a question when we met in person on Tuesday. We really don't have influence over that. That's really a purview of MCPS, the public school system. So that's something that they really think about as schools population shift really more dramatically is when they look at boundary studies. But that's not something that really we're able to influence. We want to make sure, though, that there are enough schools to serve the need of the community in general. So that concludes our presentation. Other than the fact of I still forgot to launch a poll about public facilities. So the little bit that we shared with you on our emerging ideas for public facilities, we'd love to get your impressions on that. Hope I'm not leading the audience that you need to learn more, but this is really the main highlights of what we're going to be addressing at public facilities. So I'll give a couple more seconds for that poll to stay open. All right, let's share the results. Okay, but need some refinement and need to learn more. So thank you for sharing that with us. So yes, I see there are some hands going up. We want to answer your questions, not only that have come in on the chat, but also to hear from you in person. So I think, Lily, I'll give you a little bit of time to sort out some of the questions from the chat. Maybe you can call on people. But since we see some hands up, I'll call on Siva. Siva R, are you able to unmute?
Yes, this is Shiva. I can
Shiva.
unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming here and giving us updates. And thank you for all the planning and good efforts. Really appreciate Planning Board taking these initiatives. But I think, you can see from the chat, Clarksburg residents. I'm a resident of the Clarksburg for 20 plus years now, moved in right when phase one of the Aurora Hills being built. The promise of master plan being, eliminating sections of the master plan and eliminating transportation options is not a right approach. BRT is a one alternative option. It is not a BRT versus the master plan elimination. Exit 17 is very important, and MIT3 is very important. Some of the streets are narrow, and bike paths are broken. And the trails are getting flooded, and we have a lot of existing issues that need to be addressed. So we really request you to pay attention to some, safety issues that we have. Skylark Road is a massive disaster. Very narrow. It creates a safety hazard during the school timings. Anybody is traveling on some of our streets, they're getting congested. We've been getting gridlocked. So we really want county to pay attention to the growing Clarksburg before you do any new development. Please do the infrastructure. We urge you to provide, big attention to the infrastructure. And thank you for coming here.
All right, thank you for your comment. I'll just reflect on one comment about M83. I know many of you are aware of it. We are aware of it as well. Because we are located in a slightly different location, I know it matters to the community, but we won't be making a recommendation or addressing it in our sector plan. I know that's going forward through the planning board through the master plan of highways and transitways. So I know it matters to the community, but it's not a element of the transportation network that we'll be addressing directly in our sector plan. Jason, I think I saw your hand next.
Yes, thank you so much for taking a long time to to meet with the community in Clarksburg. I do have one request of the Planning Commission itself, which is to actually do a meeting up here on the Clarksburg Gateway Master Plan, because a lot of people here, they work during the day, they have long commutes, they can't make it to Wheaton for a meeting. Like, it really needs to be a convention. Wheaton's on the other side of the world. If you are if you are planning something in the up county, addressing something in the up county, you need to come to the up county, to Germantown, like you did for the master plan of highways meetings. That was really effective. We heard a lot from Clarksburg residents about M83. The second thing I have to say is just more of a general concern, which is you keep planning up county communities, and in this case, Clarksburg in particular, as if they were cities and not suburbs. Clarksburg is a suburb. What it is lacking is the infrastructure and is jobs. Basically what you're doing is stranding people out here, because just they're so far away from job centers. They're so far, they live a couple miles from grocery stores. They live a couple miles from key infrastructure. I don't think that there's adequate, recreation facilities in Clarksburg either, libraries, community services, things like this. So people are often stranded. And what you're planning to do is you're planning to increase density, have more people come out to this community, live in this community where these things don't exist. And there's been a lot of broken promises in Clarksburg, and people just don't believe that they're going to get what they were promised. So what the county needs to do is to deliver first on what was promised and then plan for new density. Until what was planned and promised already has been delivered, there's going to be a lot of community resistance to additional development, and I think rightfully so. The last thing I'll end on is, people out here, there's not a great public transportation uptake because it's extremely inconvenient. Bus rapid transit is not going to materially change that. Clarksburg and other parts of the up county need roads. They need roads that can be used without, a lot, like, that are easy to use for drivers. And if it means getting to a place like in Clarksburg for new retail, is going to depend for its success on people from Germantown, on people from Damascus who have to drive. And they're not going to drive there unless there's adequate parking. You can get in and out without it being a pain. Things like places that the county has built and developed, like Pike and Rose. I don't go to Pike and Rose because the parking is so horribly inconvenient and narrow, and it makes me nervous to drive there. So I just don't go. I just go somewhere else where I can drive through. People are already in their cars. They can go to Urbana, they can go to Frederick, they can go to Crown, and Clarksburg will lose out, just like Germantown does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your comments. I would like to respond to your first comment of holding meetings out in the community. In fact, I don't know if you heard about it, but this past Tuesday, we were at Rocky Hill Middle School for the similar meeting of this kind that we're having today. We've had a number of meetings out in Clarksburg, the high school, the middle school. over the last year a couple times. So we have been out there for the Gateway Sector Plan. I think there are future opportunities, but I take your comments to heart. But thank you for your other comments. We'll make sure that we look at those and consider them.
And I mean the planning board itself. You guys are
Oh, planning board. Okay.
Yeah, the planning board itself should do a meeting like they did on M83 last week for the
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there could be
Please
opportunities,
bring-
especially if there's a public hearing happening. I think that's an
Yes.
opportunity to come into the community. Yeah. Okay, thanks for correcting me. Biju, please.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity here. I'd like to second Jason's request that the planning board should come here more often, and they should be requested to take transit to come in here and see how that goes for them. And especially, plan it in such a way that those meetings are at 6 p.m. in Germantown or in Clarksburg, and they should be asked to take transit. So that's my first request. I had a question for Mr. Nevi, who talked about removing the exit 17. I'd like to know the rationale behind that. As you've heard, we have doubled in population between 2020 and 2020, from 20,000 to more than 40,000. How is it that, we have not had a single road built in the last 20 years? There's not been a single road built beyond Ridge Road. And Clarksburg pretty much, is at the intersection of Ridge Road and 355, Clarksburg ends. Not seen a single road development built beyond Ridge. M83 is stuck. Snowden Farm is stuck, at Ridge Road. It goes to the community. Thank God that got built. Observation Road is, been, fragmented for years. Exit 17 was needed even when Cabin Branch was getting done to take care of all the extra population, but that was kicked down the road, and now you're proposing to take it off the plan. So someone can provide some rationale as to how that even comes about with all these other things that are already exploding at the seams?
Hey, this is Nick here. Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of the concern that I'm hearing about traffic is the conversation is centered around traffic on 355.
Not really. It's 355, 270. Every road in this area is congested and takes nearly double the time than it should take at any given time. We are not just talking about, rush hour or something. So 270, the reason 355 gets jammed up is because 270 is jammed up. If there are more exits that come into the residential areas like this one would come, you would have some folks getting off 355. So it's a bit of both. And so we need not one or the other, we need all of the above.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we definitely support, Observation Drive forming that new south-north connection as a parallel to 355. We think is going to be pretty impactful on the overall traffic situation. We're still working on the modeling and the intersection level analysis piece of the modeling. But we're seeing some early results that are showing that traffic redistribution, and in some of our future test scenarios, we're seeing less total volume and less mostly in the PM peak volume on the 355. And so we're trying to make the best analysis that we can of what the impacts of this interchange are going to be on traffic. But I think it's also important to remember that building roads to relieve traffic has a very, very steep diminishing return. It maybe in the short term will relieve traffic in certain areas, but it just pushes the bottleneck somewhere else. And not to say that it's not worth doing sometimes and it's not important, but network connectivity is more important than adding lanes. And you can't build yourselves out of traffic. Lane expansion projects don't work in the long run, and they end up just resulting in like areas that are still seeing similar levels of congestion. Um, you know, uh, the only long-term solution to, a finite amount of space to travel on is to increase the efficiency of the things that are traveling along that path. So that's, more transit options. That's shifting mode and getting people. But it does require that we provide that really high quality transportation service. And I do acknowledge that without that piece, it's just not. Yeah, you can't do nothing. Like the high quality transit piece is an important mitigation. It helps everyone, people that ride it, people that don't, everyone benefits from having more people on transit. And so, yeah, all to say is that we're looking at it. We are going to do our best to analyze the modeling information that we have and try to understand if all of the impacts of the interchange for the immediate community and for the environment that it's going to be built upon are worth the benefits that we receive from building it.
I would just request that, the 40,000 homes that have been built here have done the maximum damage to the environment already. So removing a small exchange and trying to, put it under an environmental excuse won't really fly with the people here. The forests and the wetlands and the aquifers that have been impacted have already been impacted. And the Clarksburg master plan actually is a very thoughtfully done plan that manages to balance, a lot of the sensitive areas with the kind of dense population we have seen here. So, the using that as a way to say the exchange is somehow not required is a little superfluous at this point. You've already brought the people in who need those infrastructure. This is not for future development. This is for existing development that already is existing and suffering. So I would just request that the exit 17 should remain and observation drive should be completed because both are required for the type of congestions we see here. So that's my request, and I hope you would consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Candy, I think you're up next.
Hey, yes. First, I would like to thank you guys as well for putting together this meeting and opportunity for us to ask questions and hear further about the development plan. The two things that I did want to mention, and I came in on the tail end of the conversation for schools, when you had mentioned that middle school in this area, at capacity wise, I believe you said was fine and it wasn't a concern. Can you repeat that or say that again for me? Because I didn't miss the end of that. I wanted to, I guess, give my input on that, but I want to see what you said again before I gave that input. Do you mind repeating that?
Yes, I'll do my best. I am also not the school's planner in our department, but my impression of what I've heard from them is that they are looking at the out years going forward from today and how students come and go from housing that's already in place, how new students come into new housing development that we are expecting to, fulfill the opportunities under the zoning code and developable properties. So their understanding is that as the years go on in the next 5, 10 years of the capital improvements that the school system's looking at, that there is not a overcapacity issue for any of the school levels, elementary, middle, or high school. Now, this may have been a problem in the past, but it sounds like with the opening of recent elementary schools, Cabin Branch in particular, taking a lot of students from the Clarksburg area to that new school, with other middle school renovations, and I think there was a recent high school that opened. That capacity issue is relieved in the out years. That's my understanding.
And that's what I thought I heard, and that's what I wanted to just clarify. From my point, I believe a lot of other parents feel this way as well. The Cabin Branch Elementary School is definitely beneficial for helping with the elementary school children. But when it comes to the middle schools, we have one middle school in Clarksburg. Yes, Neelsville is where they redirected our children, but that's in another city. Yes, it's only 8 minutes away, but it's not Clarksburg. And what frustrates me as a parent in Clarksburg is I built my home in Clarksburg for the promise of my kids to go to the community schools, the neighborhood schools, and be in Clarksburg. And from what I've experienced of having a kid in high school, middle, and elementary, is there's a lot of division and separation. Whether it's at the elementary school age, for instance, kids who go to Cabin Branch, they're with their peers from kindergarten or preschool to sixth grade. But as soon as sixth grade comes, they might be redirected to Germantown, Neillsville. And a lot of their friends may be in Clarksburg at Rocky Hill. And then when it comes to high school, their friends are going to Clarksburg High School, but our kids are going to Seneca Valley in Germantown. So for me, when I see new developments being built, I'm extremely frustrated because I feel like they're pushing our children in Clarksburg into another city with no consideration. Instead, they're putting more development. And I don't feel like we need more developments personally. I feel like our children need more resources. They need more places to go within their community. So that's one point of frustration that I have. And then the other point I would ask is, as a community leader, that you guys do engage more directly with us in our needs for the community as well. So I would hope an independent meeting or working group is put together with leaders within the community, whether it be small business, big business, nonprofit, whatnot, that we come together to really come up with a plan that benefits us as a whole. Those are the only two main things that I'm on this meeting to request and ask for.
Okay, thank you. Well, those are big ones. Those are important. I'll take the last one first. I'm always happy to hear from people in the community that we have not yet reached. And if we need to come out and meet with a neighborhood group, a community organization, nonprofit, we want to do that. I think we always have more opportunity to reach more people, have more discussions if we haven't already reached them already. So please reach out to me if you know of any groups that we haven't reached yet. We're happy to come meet with you all. So that's one thing. The other thing about schools, we have a very limited influence on how the school boundaries are set. And I know as a parent, I appreciate your concern with kids not attending the same schools, not moving up in grades with their peers, with their friends. I think we can speak to that to some degree to help encourage neighborhood schools to be a priority and kids to not be shifted too much, but we really just don't have a lot of influence on that. I've heard that there is a boundary study coming up with the school district in sort of the Upcounty North cluster area, the several high school clusters. I don't know the exact timeline on that. We'll have to look up what that is. But I hear you there. I think we can try to talk with the school system about it from the planning department, but that really isn't our function. So that's going to be a whole nother effort, I think, in figuring out how to assign kids to schools going forward in Clarksburg.
Well, thank you for taking that time to respond to my inquiry. And I was a part of the first committee and with the boundary studies, and I intend to be as involved in the next one as well. And I also will follow up with an email to personally introduce myself and see how I can contribute in any way. So thank you again.
Please do. Mr. Burke?
Hi, thank you for taking the time this evening. I have a number of concerns, especially with the transportation. The buses that are running in our community often seem like single passenger chauffeurs for limousines, right? What are you using data-driven current ridership to drive your need for having the BRT coming up to Clarksburg? And is it going to end at the ComSat Center or is it going to end at Cabin Branch? There are a lot of questions with that. Another one is safety. We have, from what I know, we have two sheriff officers, patrol cars touring Clarksburg, basically one at a time. We don't have much as far as safety goes. When you increase transit, or if you bring up the red line, what is that going to do to safety concerns? And is that going to be matched with increased security by our local police departments? Another thing is when we're talking about traffic congestion, 355 between 7:30 and 8:30 in the morning is almost impossible next to the high school. Going to the high school Rocky Hill area. Um, and that hasn't gotten any better. In fact, it's actually gotten worse because parents are dropping kids off in the middle of 355, even though the principal keeps on saying, don't do that, right? Um, is there any plan to open up Shawnee Lane through the ComSat Center? The road already exists. If you look at any Google Maps, it exists there, but it's closed off to public access. That could be a simple short-term gap to a solution to reroute traffic off from 355 and onto West Old Baltimore, getting rid of that bottleneck area. Um, and even when we're talking about Shawnee Lane, I live next to Shawnee Lane. It is a half-mile strip of beautifully paved roads. On any given night, you can hear the street racers out there. We do not have enough security. We don't have enough police officers running the area. Um, and it happens at least once a week at all given times. So yeah, we do have security issues here. As far as recreation goes, we have some of the most beautiful parks in the area, Black Hills and Little Bennett. But try getting there by bike or by walking. It's a death trap. You need to have people try riding those bike lanes across the overpass of 270. Those are white knuckle ones. Let me tell you, I've done it a number of times. It's I'd rather deal with rocks and stumps in the woods than the 18-wheelers flying by me on both sides. You have bike paths on Clarksburg Road are that are there and then they disappear, and then 500 feet down the road they reappear. And these are all brand new constructed roads. Where was the planning in all of this? And what is going to be done to correct this? I think that's good. I think other people have questions. I'll let you answer those.
Thank you for that. These are important topics. I think I'm going to hand it over to Nick to talk about, in whatever order, I think you brought up BRT, how to support transit, the rationale for transit. Nick, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. There was a lot there. I tried to take notes. I'll respond to the things that I can that I was able to capture as you were talking. And you certainly have a great, local perspective on some things, some very small details, especially the potential racing activity on Shawnee Lane, which we can certainly put the brakes on that, if you'll excuse the expression, with some traffic calming measures. We can definitely recommend, there are things like, speed humps, traffic tables. We can work with MCDOT to determine what might be the best solutions if that's an ongoing issue. Because yeah, that does tend to happen with roads that are straight with few intersections and no signals. So that does seem kind of like the prime candidate for activity like that. Talking about the BRT, so I think you had a question about like where it was going and maybe where it started. So the corridor connector route will run approximately to Stringtown Road and Gateway Center Drive. That'll be kind of the last stop of the corridor connector, and that route will go from Stringtown Road all the way down to the Germantown Transit Center, and then there'll be a transfer point at around Milestone to the 355 BRT route, which goes all up and down 355. And then the 355 route comes around Snowden Farm, down Stringtown Road, and then ends at the outlets. So that's kind of where, and there's about three stops planned on the connector in the Clarksburg area, and I think 4 to 6 in the 355 route that goes along Stringtown. We're trying to figure out how best to serve those stations, especially in the new development area. We have more opportunities to get things like adequate parking. There might be some opportunities for parking at the outlets for the 355 route. But certainly not every single station will be placed in a way that allows for like a full park and ride situation. Yeah, I mean, you were also talking about data and bus ridership and bus planning. That is done by, I'm not trying to pass the buck to MCDOT. They're the ones in charge of operations, so they could probably speak more to that. And if there's anyone in the meeting from MCDOT that wants to comment on that, I would appreciate your perspective. But just from like a overall planning perspective, there is this cycle between low ridership and low service. So when you have it's sort of a feedback loop when there's not a lot of service, it's not a convenient thing to use. Not many people use it, and then when you look at the information, you see, well, not many people are using this. So what we're hoping to do is beef up these services so that we can see what the ridership would be if the service was more convenient and not judging the performance of a particular bus route on the way it works when it's maybe not serving the community well. I don't know that that's the perfect information to tell us that we should just give up on it. And then, yeah, we are really aware of the parks and their access by bike. We're close. I have also ridden around many of the bike lanes and paths in Clarksburg. I've done the 355 or the Stringtown Road crossing, and I agree it was not my favorite thing. And I took a look at West Old Baltimore Road, and I said I think I'll stop here. So we're really aware that this is important, and we really want to see a, bike connection across 270. It's tough, it's challenging. There's a lot of like engineering things that need to go into that. But we think it's possible, and I'm really pushing for that. And I know that Lily at the Parks Department is excited as well about better connections to parks.
So
And
Nick,
I know I didn't hit everything you asked, but let's
what about opening of the Shawnee Lane through Comsat that's already existing?
Hmm. Yeah, so that is something that are hoping to do with our updates to the master plan of highways, by having that Shawnee Lane kind of extending and forming that, internal main street to the Comstat property, and instead of being a driveway, kind of being a real street. And so you could theoretically drive down that street, connect to Little Seneca Parkway, and then go left or right once you get to Little Seneca, depending on where you're headed.
And Nick, as development occurs on ComSat, there's opportunities to create an observation drive connection. So that would be another north-south
Right. Yeah,
opportunity
exactly.
from
So
Shawnee. Yeah.
exactly. So when you get to Shawnee, that intersection of Gateway Center, Observation, and then Shawnee Extended, or whatever that street becomes named, you would have four options to choose.
So the way you're saying about a BRT, even to get to Germantown, I have to take two BRT buses, one from Stringtown, get to Milestone, and then do an exchange there. I mean, how does that even work as a transportation solution for something where I might be able to go to work by using the BRT, but when I'm coming back, I have to do groceries, I have to pick up my child, things like that, where everything, all the other amenities are miles away. How do you expect a BRT to be a solution for, removing an exchange or removing, doing all these delays to existing plans? I mean, it seems like you guys don't have you just don't have a lay of the land here.
Well, can you let Nick respond? Because I think we may understand it more than you think.
Okay, so to answer your first question, the corridor connector route. So there's two different routes that are planned. They intersect at Stringtown Road. So that's just like a transfer station where both stops or both routes meet. But so yeah, it depends on where you live, where you're starting your trip. If you're starting your trip sort of in the center of this newer area in the plan area, maybe it's a one seat trip to the Germantown Center, the Mark Station. But if you're on the 355 side, if you're on Snowden Farm, if you're near that area, or if you're in Cabin Branch and maybe you're a little bit closer to the outlets, it would be a no transfer trip to, you could go to anything along 355 along the route, Shady Grove Metro, anything like that. Um, so, like anything, it depends on where you're starting and how many transfers you would need.
So is the BRT for Clarksburg funded already? Are there funds existing and is it planned? And if not, when is it planned?
So the corridor connector route is it's in an early stage. We don't even have the road completed that it intends to be on. The 355 route is in implementation and design, and I don't know the exact stage that it is at because it's done in many, many phases. But again, I'll call on anyone from MCDOT if y'all are still here. If you could provide more detail on that than I could at the moment. Otherwise, I'll have to get back to you later with more specific answer to that question about operations.
I can say Chris from DOT. Unfortunately for that section of 355 BRT, but we're still looking to get that funded. It's in an early design phase, but to be completely honest, there is no timeline on that. It's a very expensive program. The county is very short on CIP funds, so that it is going to be a way away. Very important, but it's going to take some time.
Again, I just feel that you shouldn't be removing things from the master plan unless things are something else that is effective is already in place. So again, I reiterate my request that do not remove exit 17 from the plan at this point.
Okay, thank you again. Let's try to keep in order so everyone can share, but thank you for putting that in. Sarwar, can we hear from you, please? And if you're trying to raise your hand, could you use the raise hand feature so we can keep folks in line and be fair about that if you can find it, hopefully. Please, Sarwar.
Yes, thank you very much for organizing this call, and thanks for coming out to Rocky Hill. My question is also related to BRT along 355. If BRT along 355 is not funded, there should be no development happening because the infrastructure for Clarksburg has been delayed year after year after year after year. In fact, there has been no development at all. M83, I know you're not responsible for it, but M83 was part of the design, part of the plan when my community was built. Clarksburg village has 4,400 homes. It's the largest HOA in Montgomery County. M83 was included when that plan was approved. And now that everything has been built, M83 might be removed from the plan. In fact, right now, it's just a bike lane. Now, who's going to bike to Shady Grove Metro every day from Clarksburg Village and think they're going to go to work and come back home? It's just not practical. It doesn't make sense. This is like complete chaos. This is not a plan. This is complete chaos. So I'm asking the planning department to plan based on what makes sense. BRT along 3. So here's my question for BRT along 355. How many of these stops have parking? Because I don't live close to any of the stops and I can't walk to that place. So how are people supposed to use BRT along 355? Is there parking? That's the question. Is there parking along BRT 355 for all the stops?
I don't believe at all the stops. I think there's going to be parking at, I think there's opportunities for parking at some of the stops. We have an opportunity in, this plan to, at least for the corridor connector route, have opportunities to add parking to the recommendations and conditions around the stops.
Okay. There was a BRT route from Clarksburg going to Shady Grove Metro, BRT Route 23. If BRT is a solution that was already there, why was that route removed and nobody talks about it anymore? Why are we reinventing the wheel along 355, which is a very narrow one-lane road with housing on both sides? I'm trying to understand the logic why one BRT route was removed and the other one, a new one is being added.
That's something that I will have to. I don't know the history of that project intimately, so I would have to look into that, and I can try to reconnect with you if you would like to.
I would like to, yes.
Okay.
Well, maybe I can provide some insight on that. I think you might be referring to the Maryland 355 North bus rapid transit route that would take travelers from Clarksburg Outlets through Clarksburg down to Shady Grove Metro Station as a way station, but then further south. So part of a much longer corridor that would serve these places. I think whether that corridor alignment is on Frederick Road or Snowden Farm Parkway, that was still sort of is being figured out by our transportation department. I don't know that it's been decided necessarily, but my understanding is that that route would provide a one-stop or a one-ride opportunity from downtown Clarksburg and the outlets and the village and town centers to Shady Grove as well as Point South on the 355, Maryland 355 route. Now, what we are considering more seriously, more particularly in the sector plan, it's a small area, is a different bus rapid transit route that has long been planned between Stringtown Road as a north terminus, which we're thinking about. We would like to extend it into the town center if possible. So we want Montgomery County Department of Transportation to consider that. So to provide a bus rapid transit route between Clarksburg and Germantown. So that would be a additional bus rapid transit route, essentially enhanced bus, more than the local buses can serve today, more frequent, better stations, better experience between Germantown Town Center and Clarksburg Town Center, ideally. So I think because it's passing by Milestone, it's passing across Stringtown Road, that provides opportunities for intersections and transfers to the Maryland 355 route that goes to Shady Grove. But we are also looking at this corridor connector that can get people from Clarksburg to Germantown. So I think there's two different routes. As Nick said, I don't know that there have been any routes that have been removed. It may be that there are segments there were many alternatives and one alternative was chosen over another one that may have shifted things around, but we may have to look into that more if you have further clarification.
So as an FYI, BRT Route 23 went from Clarksburg directly to Shady Grove Metro via M83. So it was the fastest way. It was truly rapid. BRT along 355 going to Germantown and going from different spots with stops is not rapid. When people go to work, they have to go as fast as possible, come home as fast as possible, because commute time is really eating up into their quality of life. So what we are facing is a lack of quality of life in Clarksburg. And I don't know, Planning Commission should take ownership. Why is this happening?
Okay, thank you. We will bring that to them and have conversations with our transportation colleagues as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Wafa Jawad, I want to call on you because I don't think we've heard from you yet.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, first of all, for hosting this meeting and for all the meetings that you have hosted in the past. I've attended every single one, or I've tried to, and I really appreciate the work that you all are doing. So much kudos to you. What I kind of wanted to get a little bit more information about and also make a comment about was the potential shared use path that would be connecting Black Hill Park and Little Bennett Park, because I'm having a little bit of trouble visualizing how that might happen because they are kind of far away from each other. And if I am picturing both roads that this path would go on correctly, West Old Baltimore and Clarksburg Road, Maryland 121, those are kind of narrow roads, and there really is no sidewalk infrastructure existing there at all right now, with the exception of some of the newly developed infrastructure by Cabin Branch, and then kind of where Snowden Farm Parkway is, and all the work that was just done by Little Bennett Elementary School. So, what is the plan specifically for that? And then just in general, I want to flag that Clarksburg really does not have enough sidewalks. So the reason a lot of us are very car dependent in Clarksburg, even though things are near each other, is because it really is not safe to be walking. I live in the vicinity of the ComSat area where the ComSat building is, and I would love to walk to the post office more regularly, but I don't do that as much as I should. And I get in my car to drive maybe a minute down the road because I am scared that I'm going to get hit by a car. And that is a road that there is a sidewalk. So that's my first comment about sidewalks. And then second, as we have the conversations about bike lanes and expanding bike lanes and having alternate modes of transport for folks, I just think that Clarksburg would really benefit from more protected bike lanes. If we look at what was done near Seneca Valley High School, even if that's sometimes confusing to folks who are in cars, the bike paths that we currently have in Clarksburg are really, really bad, especially the ones by the 270 interchange. When you're trying to get onto the highway, it is very scary. And I've seen people biking it in the morning during rush hour, and I am fearful for their life every single day. So I just want to highlight that. I don't know if that's something planning is considering as we look towards bike lanes as a potential way to get people out of their vehicles, but having them be kind of separate from the road, however you can do that, would definitely be helpful and necessary. So I will stop there. Thank you.
All right. I'll just go ahead and take this one. Thank you so much for your comments. We'll start at the top and work our way down. So yes, the park to park connection, Black Hill to Little Bennett. It's not like you get on a greenway trail that's one trail. It's a network of connections to get from those two places. The Westfield Baltimore connection is really important. And we've been doing some collaboration with the Parks Department on, like you said, how would that exactly work? So the problem is getting under 270. That underpass is pretty constricted. So we're looking at ways to carve out a little bit of room on the south side so that there can be a path that connects, underneath 270 and brings you to the edge of the park where there's, a road that's being constructed, Lake Ridge Drive, that will have another complementary path. And then from that point, it would be up to the Parks Department to complete that remaining segment of trail into the park. And from there, you would go up Lake Ridge Drive. You could either go across Little Seneca, and in its final form, there'll be a dedicated bike facility to get you across Little Seneca, and then you could get to 355 and ride up 355. You could get to the Greenway, right up the Greenway, and then be on Stringtown Road. And then there are already planned shared use paths that do bring you that final way to Little Bennett Park to the north. It's not a direct route. It requires a little bit of like snaking around, but that's something that we also hope to address with the improved wayfinding is give people the opportunity to see that, oh, I'm in Cabin Branch, like, oh yeah, I can bike to this other place, and here's how, and you can, get a better sense of the network, is something that we're definitely trying to promote. Um, yeah, and yeah, we're also, we're very aware that there are some missing sidewalk connections. Some of that has to do with the way that, frontage improvements are made during development, and, certain properties may kind of have a gap in the network, and there might not be redevelopment, there might not be a trigger for us to ask for those frontage improvements. So, those situations are a little tricky, and something that we are putting together as part of the larger set of recommendations is gathering up all of these tiny missing pieces and exploring whether or not we can bundle those into one CIP project so that they could maybe find funding as like hey, here's 8 segments that are missing. Each individual part is like maybe not a huge deal. It's very important, but like when you consider it all together, it raises to the level of like, oh, this is a capital investment. Um, and then finally, I guess the feeling of the sidewalk not being safe, I think has a lot to do with, how far the sidewalk is buffered from the road. Um, maybe that's not your experience. I'd love to hear if that's not what makes you feel like if you think of a safe sidewalk, a place where you feel good walking, usually there's a bigger buffer. We're trying to have all the new streets will be designed under the Complete Streets Design Guide, which has much wider buffers than roads that were constructed in the past. Um, so I hope that answers and addresses some of your points. And I really appreciate your comment about bike connections and active transit.
All right, Mr. Stunder, I think I'm gonna skip over you again once more just to give Dan Siemens an opportunity, and then I'll come back to you. I see owner, you have your hand up. Maybe we'll go Dan, then owner, then Mark, please, if that's acceptable.
Oh, hi. How are you this evening? I'm mostly concerned about the ComSat building preservation, and I'm going to put in submittal to the Historic Preservation Commission. But I'm also been looking at this site plan. I don't live in Clarksburg. I did go to Clarksburg Elementary in third grade. I went on to higher education too thereafter. But the road through there has been come to my attention. I think Observation Drive should be extended north and get into Gateway Center Drive. I think it will produce a bypass around the old town. I think it'll be accessible and relieve some traffic on 355 and 270 north south. I also think it may in the future provide access to the ComSat building should it be reutilized and modified for employment or for other amenities that the Clarksburg may need. The plan is very sectional, and I think it would be it lends itself to quite a bit of modification. There could be both commercial, you know, or residential use of the building and or public use of it. The ground certainly public use because it's so vast. But I just put it out there for you capable planners to consider the roots around it and also the possibility of that building being reutilized for employment and other uses. It's very iconic. I used to ride along, I-70 as it was. It's now I-270. And my parents would comment on this building to, family and friends from out of town. They would see this startling building out in the middle of the open countryside, and the purpose of it was very iconic to satellite communications and the standards that the government required. And it really marked the space age occurring to us in this area. It was a symbol of that, and it is iconic in that regard. We're well into the space age now, but it has that moniker to it as representing that age. And I do think it can be repurposed. And you are looking for more employment in that area. And I believe it could be utilized. I think should be considered. I know they're having problems selling it, and the values have been discussed and all, but I don't know if it's been fully analyzed or not.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the ComSat building is an important part of our study and how we're looking at it. We've considered ways that it can be adaptively reused. I think there'll be ongoing conversations. And as John mentioned earlier, the Historic Preservation Commission will be considering their recommendation for preservation of the building next week at their meeting on the 22nd in the evening. So that's an opportunity to provide additional feedback.
Okay.
Can I hear anything else from you, or
Oh, no,
I know time is getting short. I'm sorry to cut you
know
short.
that's very good. That's all I
Okay.
had to say for this
All right.
evening. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Is it Mr. and Mrs. Sinke? Is that who you are? Are you able to unmute yourself? I believe maybe I can for you. No, I did. I'm sorry. I muted you again.
Okay. Can you
Yes.
hear us?
Yes, I can now.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ann, thank you. And as so many have expressed, thank you for all the, incredible work you've done in the Clarksburg planning and consideration, et cetera, et cetera. I sort of represent Friends of 10 Mile Creek, and we've gone into so many specifics of the planning and the housing and the this and that, but very little has been said about the reservoir issue. And it really is a very important issue because that stream and the streams around, and the they're decreasing. They used to be categorized as excellent, and their categorization is going down. So I really would ask and hope for more specifics on what, I don't know if you've done any studies or what specific plans you have. And you've mentioned, yeah, we're going to build or plant more trees or something, but there have been, as far as I know, and I've been to all of the meetings, no specifics on what you're going to do. Do you have some specific plans for understanding, studying, accommodating the needs for the streams and reservoir?
Well, I will say that, primarily we are setting up a foundation for environmental protection, development, roadways. We don't know exactly how or when or whether built properties will develop. So we don't necessarily dictate how that happens. It makes it hard to perform those studies and assessments. I know that there are scientific studies of the stream conditions over time, the watershed conditions. So we are considering those elements in our planning. But really, we're trying to establish in the sector plan overall guidelines for how development and where development should occur to help protect the environment. But I don't know that we would be able to offer any specific studies other than what stream conditions and watershed analysis has already been done.
Do you have any specific, I don't know, plans or recommendations for, I don't know, where the building can occur, where it can't occur? Because in the original master plan, there were such specifications, but it seems as if those don't operate now.
So they are still in effect. The 1994 plan is still in effect and influences development and protection today until the sector plan is approved. We certainly are expecting that the stream valleys, the buffers beyond streams will be totally off limits and protected. We want to try to expand that area to protect trees and natural features, meadows, open spaces to the greatest extent possible. We're trying to strike a balance between areas that are upland and areas that are established forests to be protected, while also expecting that there will be development coming forward. But yes, I would say that our expectation and what the plan will be recommending for the Coolbrook Run tributary, Little Seneca Creek, major forested areas today will continue to be protected, even as we see development happening in the future.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And I think that's another reason why we're rethinking the transportation network that we think is important to connect roadways, but we want to get it out of the sensitive areas, bridges to be designed in a way that avoids environmental impacts, stays out of the floodplains and stream valleys as much as possible. So the sector plan will really be pushing for sustainable development, best practices to be implemented on properties, roadways to be built with low impact as much as possible. So we're trying to keep all this in mind while also thinking about the potential for development in the area.
Right. Clearly, you have a tough job ahead of you, and we're
It is
very
a challenge, yes.
for your wish, yes, to say the least. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Mark, I think we'll get back to the line. Would you still like to share?
Yes, thank you, Clark, and thank you for your team for putting this together. I think we need to realize that the concept property is really, to me, the key to everything here. And it's going to be the developers and the economy that's going to drive what's going in there. And planners can only go so far, and then you're going to react to whatever the developer will come in with. Early on in the comments, I put in something about international village at Clarksburg. I think something like that would work. I think we need to take a look at some economic commercial development into the concept site. Something like a mini Epcot without rides or anything like that, like an India section, a Japan section. And I think that could be modeled after something that went on or something that's been developed northwest of Atlanta. And I think that would drive some economic development. So I have that in the chat, and maybe a developer or someone's listening tonight and can take a look at that. But I really wanted to say that planning's a tough job. I mean, you guys have it really, really hard here. And I think sometimes planners get it right. I mean, look at the ICC 35 to 40-year battle, and look how much the ICC's opened up for the county, what developments opened up for that. The Great Seneca Highway, opening up the medical corridor. Germantown, planned out. Yes, it has some issues and so forth, but that was pretty well planned. But I think, unfortunately, your predecessors didn't get it right for Clarksburg in terms of at least the transportation side and the traffic side. One perfect example is Cabin Branch itself. I-270 is the great divide between Cabin Branch and the rest of Clarksburg. There are literally no amenities, no shopping centers or anything on the west side of I-270. The same thing goes for Creekside development. The same thing goes for the new Lithicum development. So I hear all the people online and I read the comments, and they're absolutely correct about what's happened. But this is a case where planners did not get it correctly done for Clarksburg. And now, unfortunately, we see the results. I think the solution here is really not going to be driven by planners. I think it has to be driven by the politicians. And I think Marilyn Balcom's a really good political person in the Up County. And I think the Clarksburg citizens need to go to her and pound on her desk and say, this is what we want to have, and this is what we propose, and let the political system work. Because the planners can only go so far. And unfortunately, the planners blew it with Clarksburg, at least up till now. Now, you guys aren't going to blow it, but I think your predecessors did. I just want to ask Nick a question here on exit 17, something I don't understand here. And there's been a lot of comments in the chat and other people about exit 17. Back in the spring or summer, I forget when you had the early meetings at Rocky Hill, exit 17 was in the plan. And I think you presented it back then as exit 17 was one of several options. And those options were driven by modeling. And if I remember correctly, it depended on the density of the housing and the density of the development and what the zoning was going to be. That was going to drive the one option, which was to have exit 17. Now, in this presentation, we hear exit 17 is taken out. I don't know. I'm not a planner, but logic kind of tells me that, okay, maybe a decision was made here in that there's going to be less dense housing. Therefore, the need for exit 17 is eliminated. So what has happened between the spring, summer, and now to take exit 17 out? Because exit 17, you've heard the vital need for it. All the people in the chat can say, yeah, we need exit 17, but you guys look at data and you don't go by emotions. You take a look at data and you take a look at modeling. So something is driving exit 17. It's a yes or no. So there must be scenarios that are flying around here that says if we put X amount of housing and density into CompStat area, that's going to drive exit 17. If we put Y amount of housing and density into the area, that's not going to drive exit 17. So I'd like you to drill down, Nick, on exit 17, specifically what has happened there, why the change?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the data and the modeling discussion is a long one, and we are in the process of working on some of the last stages of the modeling that we will do, which is an intersection performance. So we've taken the regional model, which is developed by a partnership of playing agencies around the entire DMV. We all share aspects of this model. And that model is informed by land use assumptions and land use data that we plug into to these regions, and then those land uses feed into some assumptions. No model is perfect. You can't always account for the human factor, but it makes decisions based on data that we have collected, such as traffic counts at intersections. And it assigns the link, each road, it assigns traffic to each road. We look at the volumes of those, and we look at, tweaking the network, saying like, okay, what if we take out this road here? What if we added lanes here? How does that impact the volume? And, so hopefully what we will see with our test scenarios, which we haven't thrown away, we still have those three scenarios. This is the scenario that we wanted to put in front of everyone today to see how you would feel and to see the reaction. And we have, yet to finish the in-depth analysis. Um, yeah, I mean, we're still testing those same scenarios that we looked at in the spring and the summer.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Of
I
course.
think you're trying to clarifying things here because it seems to me like exit 17 is going to be solely driven or mostly driven by whatever density is going to be in the ComSat area. I mean, the whole thing to this master plan, everything's important. I mean, Dowden's ordinary is important. The gateway is important. All that's important. The historic property, 355, all the church, that's all important. The big driver here is what's going into ComSat. That's going to drive everything under the sun here. And so the density is going to be extremely important. And that also will be driven by whatever developer is going to come in. He's going to say, hey, you know what? We want to do medium to high density. And that's going to then drive you guys to figure out what's the best way to go. So I'm glad at least, and I think it may clarify some of the comments here that I've seen, which are quite serious regarding exit 17, that yes, exit 17 still has a possibility here. It's not been totally eliminated. Your current modeling that you're presenting tonight, or the position that you're presenting tonight, is a middle ground that says, no, we don't think we need exit 17, but it's not off the books yet. But the final decision is really going to get driven by whatever development's going in there. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if if it's as cut and dry as that, but the 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 demand for, new interchanges, new connections is definitely highly driven by the land use. If you change those land use numbers, it has a big effect on the network. That's how it determines how many trips are generated, right? Like a house generates fewer trips than like a giant office building, for instance. So yeah, there's a very strong connection.
Yes, sure. So the
I would
final
add
decision,
that
the final
also.
decision can't be made until the developer comes in and says, okay, I'm XYZ Inc. I'm going to build X amount of houses here. Then your staff, you and your staff are going to say that's going to generate Y amount of trips. Then you're going to rerun your model and figure out whether the interchange will be there.
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. As Nick was saying, there's a number of factors. You're right that, the type of development, the density that's we're expecting on ComSat itself is one factor, but this interchange, whether it's built or not, is in relation to a larger community as well. So there's the environmental impacts, there's the cost, there's the expectation of when it would be built, whether it would be supportable by federal or state funding. So I think there's a number of factors coming into play here. We certainly want to hear from the community about it, but we're looking at it in relation to a larger context, I think, than just whether it's needed for ComSat, because I don't think ComSat development and the property owners are going to be able to pay for it themselves. This is a larger issue. So I don't know if I want to leave it there, but we are getting short on time. Is there any last feedback you want to give us, Mark, to kind of round this out?
No, like I said, I think you guys have a really hard job. I think you're living with the sins of the past planners, which I understand. I think the sins of the past planners can be addressed better by the political side of things rather than you, and then you get direction from the political side as to what to do. But I think you have a really hard job here. I appreciate it. I play SimCity too.
Okay, thank you. I used to play SimCity. Now it's
Yes.
real. So I would like to apologize for anyone else who still has their hand up. Please reach out to me and share any comments you have if you haven't put it in the chat. I think we really want to be mindful of your time and bring this meeting to a close. Just to say that our next steps are to come before the planning board to share more refined recommendations and get their feedback on how we're putting these ideas together. And we'll share that online with the public, with you all in the community, so you can see what we're going to present to the planning board. Then we'll be working with those recommendations to bring them into a working draft before the planning board seeks comment on that working draft. So there's opportunities for feedback on the working draft directly to the planning board. Once the planning board has organized the plan the way they want it, it really becomes into their hands. They'll make their recommendation to the county council that has another round of seeking public comment through testimony, and then making edits that they ask us to make. So there's a lot more work to be done. This is really kind of a midpoint in the process. I did want to say that I think there's been some questions about the chat being published. We will put the transcript of the chat online so you can see everything that people wrote into us. We're going to share the recording of the meeting online, a copy of this presentation. We'll try to share everything that we can with you. I want to thank everyone for listening to us and staying up late with us to think about Clarksburg. We're going to think about it. Hopefully not wake up too early tomorrow night, but we're thinking about this for the rest of the year. So we're going to be with you till the end. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, I think we'll draw this meeting to an end. Thank you all and good night.